My guest for tonight's Conversations with Great Minds is former CIA analyst Ray McGovern. During his 27-year career at the CIA during the height of the Cold War, Ray helped put together national intelligence estimates and also helped write the Presidential Daily Briefing. In 1990, he was awarded the Intelligence Commendation Medal in recognition of his service. Since his retirement from the CIA, Ray has turned to activism. And in 2003, he founded the group Veteran Intelligence Officers for Sanity. He has also worked as a teacher at the Servant Leadership School here in Washington, D.C. Ray McGovern, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Tom.
It's great to have you with us, especially for this segment. I'd like to start out with you. You were a CIA analyst for 27 years.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to that, and what was your sense of what you were doing?
Well, I majored in Russian undergraduate at Fordham University. And it was just at the time when the Russians were becoming very interesting with Sputnik, with Berlin, with Cuba.
That was the Soviet Union.
Yeah. So it was a natural. When I heard that this agency was set up, it was going to be a central place so that all the information on a given issue or country would be coming to one. Young people really can't understand wooden inboxes anymore, but that's the way they were, okay? And we put in my inbox 6 times a day by a person rolling a Safeway-type shopping cart down from our operations center. That's the way it came to me. And that was what was promised. And it was really, really a responsible job. When I came in the first day, on the foyer there of the entrance to the brand new CIA building, we're talking April 1963, John Kennedy president, it said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John, what a verse it is, okay? And I said, thought about my Irish grandmother, who told me once or told me 100 times, "Raymond, be truthful and honest, and then you won't give a damn what anyone says about you," I'm saying, Grandma, if that's true, no pun intended, this is going to be a good place to work.
Yeah.
It was.
It was a good place to work.
I had career protection for telling the truth. I knocked a lot of 4-star generals' noses out of joint about Vietnam. And I had protection. They would come to my bosses and they say, "No, we support McGovern. We think he's got the right line on." It was an incredible place. When you go around Washington, you say, "I worked at a place that had no political agenda," eyes glaze over and they say, "Right, in Washington, everybody's got it." We didn't, okay?
Yeah.
Now, the other CIA, and there really are too, the operational part, which Truman never intended, and which he wrote before he died, he never intended. He didn't want people overthrowing governments. He didn't want people certainly torturing people. That's an accident of history, but it was joined at the hip when CIA legislation was prepared in 1947, and it was justified at the last minute by one sentence, which said, "The Director of Central Intelligence shall perform such other functions and duties related to intelligence as the President shall from time to time direct." One sentence, okay? Now that gives an unscrupulous president, with the cooperation of an unscrupulous head of the CIA, which obtained, of course, with George W. Bush and George Tenet, that gives that president the right to have his own personal Gestapo. Do not blanch at the word. That's what happens. And that's what happened right after 9/11, when, as I like to put it, the country had a nervous breakdown. There was a choice as to how to react. George Bush, if he read the Bible twice, as his father claims he has, he knows that vengeance is mine, says the Lord, not says Dick Cheney and George Bush. They led the country into a fear-induced panic, nervous breakdown, and exploited that to wage war on a country that posed absolutely no threat to us at all.
The Praetorian Guard that the Roman empires, I think, was it Julius Caesar put together the first? I don't remember the order of the Roman emperors, but one of them put it together. They assassinated Caligula. They overthrew 3 or 4 emperors. They picked a couple of emperors. I mean, this was just like 15, 20 guys who were like the inside. They did sort of like what the Secret Service does for the president. They guarded the emperor. We still have that story about the people on the inside who are the protectors of the empire, or the protectors of the protector of the empire, ending up flipping the empire. Is something like that going on here?
You mean with respect to...
With respect to the CIA and our intelligence apparatus in general, or have they become the tail that wags the dog of government? Is the president, you know, beholden to them, or vice versa?
Well, that's a really good question. I've come to believe, and it's really hard for me to hear myself saying this, that our president is afraid of what we used to call, from the Soviet perspective, the organs of state security, okay? CIA, NSA. I have a very close friend who is a very reliable source. He has another friend, so this is at two removes, who was at a big dinner with George Bush right before the last election. And these were progressive Democrats. They were sort of saying, you know, why don't you start acting like, you know, like your promises and all. And finally he got up.
You mean President Obama?
Yeah. And he got up and he said, look, don't you all remember what happened to Dr. King?
Really?
Yeah, really. Now, as I say, I have that second hand, but my first source is...
Well, the FBI tried to take him down. I mean, they sent him letters saying, why don't you just commit suicide? It was pretty brutal what the...
It was not only Dr. King, you know.
Yeah.
It happened to another president by the name of Kennedy.
Yeah.
He's the guy that recruited me to come down here. Yeah. There's an excellent book on this, JFK and the Unspeakable, by James Douglas. Hasn't been reviewed anywhere for obvious reasons. It's excellent, and it persuades me that John Kennedy, reaching out to the Russians as he was, starting test ban treaties, pulling out of Vietnam, he had incredible opposition from the uniformed military, the troglodytes, you know, that wanted to bomb the hell out of the Soviet Union, and by the people who really resented his not coming to their aid when they invaded Cuba and the Bay of Pigs.
Yeah.
I had a personal experience of that with an instructor in early '63 who was just raving about this president, the sitting president. And here I am, you know, 23 years old. I'm saying, this is odd, you know. And it was E. Howard Hunt.
He was angry about Jack Kennedy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he was saying he promised us that he would save us if we ran into trouble. Of course, that's a lie. Yeah. We know from Alan Dulles' coffee-stained notes when he died that he was mousetrapping the president. He knew that these guys couldn't overthrow Castro, but he also knew that, that despite what Kennedy said, he would send the Air Force to bail him out. So that's all right in these... So what I'm saying here is that, you know, Obama on the one hand has adequate reason to be afraid, but on the other hand, if he's going to act like this, he really should not have run for president. You know, we need somebody with some backbone, willing to take some risks for what he knows is right. We don't have that in Obama.
Wow, that's not easy to hear. You've gone from CIA analyst to CIA critic.
Right.
When and how did that happen?
It was a straight line. Okay, I explained, you know, we could tell the truth, you know, how it was. Well, after I retired and sort of tried to divorce myself...
And that was 1990?
1990, yeah. I spent a whole, almost a decade working in the inner city where I really like to work, reaching out to people on the margins. And then I saw my profession being corrupted. I saw my former colleagues being suborned into shaving intelligence, into creating intelligence.
This is after 9/11?
Yeah, well, this was before Iraq. See? Yeah, after 9/11, when you know, Richard Clarke has that wonderful vignette down in the bunker on 9/11, when the subject of Iraq comes up, same day, right? And somebody says, well, it's really against international law to be going after Iraq because it had no connection with what happened this morning. And Bush, according to Richard Clarke, who was there and wrote in his book, he said, I don't care what the international lawyers say, we're going to kick some ass, okay? Now, that's where it started. Kick some ass. 6 days later, the CIA gets authorities of a kind that George Tenet in his book says CIA has never enjoyed before. And Tenet also says that, you know, I thought about this, and I thought things could blow up. And people, including me, could have very, very painful days before our overseers trying to explain what we did with these authorities. My God, you know, he could write that safely in a book in 2007 because he knew he'd be immune from any. But this very gutsy report by Dianne Feinstein and those incredibly professional, talented young people she got working for him, frankly, I was very surprised that she went to bat for them, and she went to the president and said, look, this is going to come out. If you don't let me put it out, it's going to come out in other ways. And of course, we know how that could work.
Right. Mark Udall was threatening to read it into the congressional record.
And he still may do more, I think, because we're seeing the top of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Those 600 or whatever pages that weren't given, the CIA said, well, these might be subjected to a presidential privilege. Well, hello, did they ask the president? No, they didn't ask the president.
Yeah.
So there's lots that has been concealed, but my point is that this week was a watershed. The truth is out. Enough of the truth is out there to realize what heinous activities. And with Dick Cheney saying, "I'd do it all again,"
right.
Well, that throws down the gauntlet. If he's not brought to justice, if at least he's not, put in his place, and this business from Carl Levin is the kind of thing that could put him in his place, then people will get the idea it is okay to do these things because we will never be held accountable. But in answer to your question, it was the corruption of the intelligence analysis that
Which is what you did.
Yeah, with my colleague now. The other guys, they do their thing, right? Yeah. Like Harry Truman said. When I saw that a case was being built to go against Iraq, when Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice had just months before said Iraq poses no threat to the United States or even to its immediate neighbors, we have been able to keep his weapons from him. Condoleezza Rice, 29 July 2001, so what, 6 weeks before 9/11. All of a sudden, 9/11, and weapons of mass destruction descend from the heavens like manna for a soft landing on the sands of Iraq, where God made that terrible mistake of putting our oil, right? Okay, it doesn't work that way. You can't get weapons of mass destruction in 6 months. So we smelled it right away. That's why we created Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. We wrote 3 memos to Bush before the war, and we warned him in our very first memo, which was written the same day that Colin Powell spoke. We said, Mr. President, we strongly advise you to widen the circle of your advisors beyond those who are clearly bent on a war for which we see no palpable reason and from which we believe the unintended consequences are likely to be catastrophic. We take no joy in having been right about that. Vote is clear. And then, of course, the Senate, as we heard before, did put out a very good study when they said that...
Yeah, I'm going to have to come back to this in just a second. More of tonight's Conversations with the Great Minds with Ray McGovern right after the break.